welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. So a couple of episodes ago, we had Ashley Hacker on, and we talked a lot about Anime North, specifically a panel that she helped facilitate regarding fandom through the decades, going back from 2010s to the aughts to the 90s to the 80s as well, with a nice, well-rounded group of contributors. And of course, we've had Dave Merrill as one of the contributors as well, who's been on multiple episodes of this podcast. But we're kind of going back to that again. This is kind of a continuation of that particular podcast because the third member of that panel is now joining us, and he's someone I've certainly been wanting to talk to for quite a while. His name is Greg. Greg, could you just give a quick introduction to yourself?
Hello there. I'm Gregory Taylor. I was at one point Sailor Mercury's ultimate fan. There's clips of me on the internet. And I was talking about the 90s at that Anime North panel.
Yes, the beloved 90s segment.
Yes.
So Greg, I think what people would most likely know him for was, he was involved in an interview in a segment in 1997 on CBC's Undercurrents news magazine program. That was a program that aired on CBC News World, hosted by Wendy Mesley. It focused on media marketing and technology. And in 1997, they did a very interesting segment about otaku, and that they approached it from some interesting angles, I would say. And Greg was one of a handful of people who was interviewed. They also interviewed William Gibson, Hitoshi Doi, who he ran the Seiyu database, which I'm not sure if that website is still running or not right now.
I don't know. Yeah.
And I know he was a guest of honor at Anime North. In the
early days, yeah.
Early days as well. And that's another thing. You are very frequently cited as being one of the few people who have actually been to almost every Anime North.
Yep. I had the 20-year run, and then it was last year, 2018, I did not go. I now have a daughter. There is a connection.
Yes. And congratulations on that, Greg. So
thanks.
So this CBC Undercurrent segment, if you have not seen it, I strongly recommend that you just pause this episode right now. When you have the next chance to go on YouTube, search CBC Undercurrents Otaku or something like that. It'll probably be the first search result, and watch that whole segment. It is kind of incredible, especially for something that aired on a national news program in 1997. When you watch the segment, it has such a 90s take on otaku, but at the same time, not one that I had that you would expect to see around that time. And at the same time, it kind of misses the mark in some interesting ways as well. But Greg in particular, they interviewed him as Sailor Mercury's ultimate fan.
The otaku, translation, shut-in, fanatic, geek, people so utterly obsessed with information that they become withdrawn from society. It seems that information technologies have bred the ultimate fan, and now they're starting to emerge here. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Bud.
Come on in. Great, thanks a lot.
So you're the ultimate fan.
I don't know if I really want to flatter myself that way, but I am definitely obsessed with Ami Mizuno, Sailor Mercury.
You guessed it. Greg Taylor is also a big fan of anime. More specifically, this 20-year-old university student's love is... She's the lead character's sidekick in the popular children's cartoon called Sailor Moon. He's created an online shrine for the inked superhero, and he's constantly searching for new information to add to it.
She wears glasses. In the fourth season, she gets glasses, and also in the fourth season, when she powers up into Super Sailor Mercury, she gets 3 earrings instead of just the 1.
Even if you don't watch the full 8-minute version of the CBC Undercurrents interview, there is a shorter version that's been edited down, specifically to the segments of Greg, where he talks about his fixation on Sailor Mercury. It is a very that segment alone. It's just a very fun and charming little interview. Greg, can you maybe paint a little bit of a picture of what was going on in the interview?
Well, I mean, the whole idea I guess they were using was, that otaku were sort of obsessed with, information and data and possibly becoming shut-ins. And so that was, I guess, what they were going for. The fact that I had a Mercury website. I was on, a web ring at the time. That used to be a thing. And I was part of the alt Sailor Moon of the National Capital Region, where I was, her representative on the posting board. And so a lot of this was, geared to this idea of, otaku online, I guess. I don't know.
So first of all, I think this segment had to be the first, before this, you'd see, hosts on YTV or, shows like The Anti-Gravity Room talking about anime as a specific focus for their own program, or as a way of expanding on programming that they were already airing. I think this news segment had to be the first nationally broadcasted major news outlet in Canada that was kind of focusing on anime as a cultural phenomenon. Although they didn't really I wouldn't say they approached it from a cultural standpoint. It was kind of they're very fixated on information. In the way that
I think that's mainly what Undercurrents was going for, and so this just happened to be, let's talk about anime for this segment or whatever.
Yeah, it fit the MO of that program, looking at how media and technology shape society and those broader ideas, and it's almost kind of a postmodernist perspective of otaku as people who collect data and then repeat data online and have the data delivered back to them. There's actually been some postmodernist writing done about otaku that interpret it that way. Hiroki Azuma wrote a book about that. It was a little later in 2001, but that kind of interpretation was floating around. They also interview William Gibson and Hitoshi Doi and a few others, and they reference things like Satomu Miyazaki, the otaku killer, who was that's a story that had broke out just a few years ago before that. And it all melds together in this it paints this very interesting picture. I think at that time, that's not how any kind of news organization would have, or any news program would really approach the subject of anime or anime fandom. But it seems that just because Undercurrents had that specific focus on the way that they did their show, the way they approach it, the way they edited everything together. You can tell when you're watching it. They've had long interviews with people, and whenever they're talking about information or dropping the word information, those are the parts of the interviews that they drop in. But yeah, it just paints this very 90s kind of almost cyberpunk interpretation.
Yeah, I guess with William Gibson, that's supposed to be expected.
They gotta, yeah. Yeah, and again, you have this. Again, it's kind of. It seems like it's swirling around the actual phenomenon of otaku, and I do find it also interesting that they make no distinction between anime fandom in Canada or the United States and the way it is in Japan. It seems like. I don't want to say that it avoids Orientalism entirely, because it kind of dives into that, but it's not treating it as treating as an entire phenomenon that people on this side are embracing the same way that it is in Japan, which is I think that is unique. That's different from what you'd find about the usual kind of anime fandom journalism from that time.
Right, and I mean, Undercurrents could have been doing that most of the, for most of their run. I honestly never really watched the show. I was approached by them through another individual I knew who had given them my name. So I wasn't, a longtime watcher of the show.
How did all that play out, really? It's 22 years ago, I know, but for the best of your recollection.
Yeah, well, it was through that National Capital Freenet posting board where in 1996 I was posting to the Sailor Moon fan group because I just sort of discovered anime through that, and there was another person on the group who knew, I guess, someone at the CBC, or knew they were looking for someone, and said, I might be a good candidate, could float my name up there. I'm like, sure, whatever. And then it just sort of started from there. They phoned me and they wanted to, talked to me, and then it proceeded to an interview, and then they actually flew me from Ottawa to Southern Ontario, which was where I lived before, because I was on a work term. I was basically going to the University of Waterloo, and then I was on work term in Ottawa, and they flew me back from Ottawa back to Waterloo so that they could get me at an anime showing and my house. So yeah.
But everything was still preserved well enough, or did you have to recreate that image to keep up appearances as well as possible?
Well, no, they filmed me in Ottawa as well, right? All the long shots where you see, you know, the posters and everything, that's in Ottawa. All of the close-up stuff, near the beginning of the segment was filmed at home in Southern Ontario, because I only discovered anime when I first went to university. So the stuff filmed in my house is like nothing. Yeah. There's the computer, which, I mean, admittedly, that was what their focus was going to be anyway. I don't know.
Nothing beats those, the way an old CRT monitor looks when it's filmed on,
there you go.
That's the aesthetic of Undercurrents right there.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't, you know, just film more of it in Ottawa, but this is just the way it kind of worked out, and I was like, sure.
Yeah. And you found, so to be clear, when you kind of discovered Sailor Moon or anime in general, that was through, discussion groups online and not through television?
Bit of both. It was actually, because I went to university in 1995, and so I'd heard from a friend about, you know, this animation out of Japan, and there's this show that's got like planets as people, and, you know, it's actually airing in North America. I'm like, okay, that's weird. But I thought, well, I was just going to Ottawa, and I don't really know anyone there, and I thought, well, I'll check this out, and, you know, maybe this is a way of, you know, hooking into a new community or whatever. I saw a couple episodes online. The very second episode I saw was the one with Greg in it, with Sailor Mercury, and so that sort of hooked me into the online group, and then things perpetuated from there.
Yeah.
So
that's the one with Amy eating the hamburger, right? Or that photograph of Amy eating the hamburger, or was this a different episode?
I believe that's the second episode with him. This is the first one where he's into the Yuma.
Yeah.
Wow, I still know some of this stuff, I think.
I had a feeling this might jog your memory.
I was just trying to think, it was at the end of one of those episodes. I'm pretty sure it was the second one. But, yeah, I've lost my train of thought there. Yes, it was sort of, if I hadn't watched the show, I probably wouldn't have felt like posting on the news group, but it was through the online forum that, you know, I sort of hooked in with the anime community.
And that led you to become involved with the club at the university?
Yes. Well, cause again, I was on work term in Ottawa, but they have universities there. And so I went to showings there. They weren't actually affiliated with the university at the time. That's one of the things I mentioned in my 90s presentation at Anime North. A lot of times they would just have showings. And of course, university has big, you know, rooms that are available to, you know, show this sort of thing. So they would just be at that sort of venue. University of Waterloo, the Control A club that really likes anime, it's an acronym. They're sort of unique in actually, you know, being affiliated with the university and showing things. A lot of that stuff didn't start to happen until the real late 90s or even early 2000s.
Do you know if that particular club is still active in any form?
Which? The one at Waterloo? It is.
Yeah.
The Ottawa, what I went to at the time, I think it was called Club anyway. It's not anyway. It's there's now a University of Ottawa club. There's a one out of Carleton as well, but they came after the fact, sort of to replace, I think, you know, these, I don't know, rogue showings or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, make it, you know, make it legal? I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it's university clubs. It's always it can be kind of questionable. You can skirt a lot of expectations when you're doing things through a university club. That is why I think they are central to so much of anime fandom in different parts of the country. especially here in Vancouver. Yeah, and I know that these screenings at University of Waterloo, they were even, I think there was even you can even find a segment on YouTube where they were talking, where they had some of the voice actresses from Sailor Moon talking about them on YTV during like a Zone interview segment, and it was also brought up by Roland Parliament in his book on the history of this production of the original 65 episodes of Sailor Moon.
And that's actually the clip from the CBC. The CBC Undercurrents was at University of Waterloo. That's the showing where you saw me.
I mean, obviously, I was not there at the time because I live in Vancouver. From my semi-outsider perspective, and I know that you were with Anime North from the beginning. Do you like what kind of led you to that, or were they involved with starting Anime North, or do you recall how much of that happened?
They weren't. I don't know really much about the origins. I know the first Anime North was August 9th, 1997, because I was in Ottawa on a work term at that point, but there were a bunch of us interested, and this was like one of the first anime cons that was, in Canada. So we'd all sort of arranged, and I forget if we carpooled or if we rented a van or something, but we all came down for that weekend in August to just attend the convention. And then after that, it shifted to July, and I was more in the area because that was my last work term in Ottawa. And then I started getting work terms in Toronto and Waterloo. And so I was, in the area and could just go there.
I know you've been to many Anime Norths, almost all of them, as we've mentioned.
Yes.
How do you feel about how the con has kind of evolved over time? Or have you been to other anime cons as well to compare it to?
Well, I've been to the one in Ottawa because there used to be the Ottawa AC Cubed Anime Convention in Canada's capital, and I actually helped out a bit behind the scenes with some of that stuff because in 2003 I moved back to Ottawa. That's when I started my teaching career and everything. So I did a help with that behind the scenes. I was also attending, so I don't know. But those are really the only two. Like, I've never gone outside Canada to a convention or anything like that. Partly it's costs, and partly it's I don't really have the desire to sort of immerse myself in tons of anime. It's just I'll get these little wedges, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
At least these days.
Even people who are more immersed in anime or cons, it's pretty rare to find someone who hops between different anime conventions within Canada just because airfare costs are so outrageous here. And that includes myself. As I've mentioned before and in this episode, that was like this year was my first Anime North ever. It was a very interesting experience, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. But yeah, people.
It started a lot smaller.
Oh yeah. It is not unfathomably huge, but when I was at Anime North, it didn't seem huge, but that's because I was only experiencing a very small part of the convention. I was like, almost everything I did was in the Delta Hotel with the panels going on there, and I would like occasionally pop over to one of the other buildings for a couple of things. But there's like two entire other sections of the con I never even saw because they're kind of off in their own universe. And Anime North is very much a con where I think everyone kind of has a different experience when they go to it, which it makes me want to go back and get more of that experience. It's very unique for an anime convention from what I've seen. It's
got all sorts of little bits.
Yeah. And it's. Yeah, and just the way that it's sprawled out in that area, and the way the businesses benefit from the event at that one time of year, everything is just aligned to keep it running, even though sometimes it feels like it's just shambled together even today. It's really remarkable.
Well, it nearly collapsed in, I think it was 2004, because it used to be at the Regal Constellation Hotel, and then that building was like condemned, and they had to move it, and that's when they moved to the convention center and everything, and it's just gotten larger from there.
Yeah, but and I've mentioned this in the episode Ashley was on, it just feels like if they had to move the venue, change where this con was, or if there was like some massive change in like the upper executives in the con, or a huge changeover in the people running the convention. It feels like it could all very well fall apart, because it's just
Right.
they have this perfect formula that just kind of keeps going and going and going. But if you change a few ingredients a little too much, things might not go so well.
Well, and part of the reason the convention in Ottawa, the AC Cube, part of the reason that folded was because there just wasn't really a venue there large enough that was also affordable enough to hold it anymore.
Yeah, this is an interesting problem we're facing in Vancouver right now, because there's been a lot of issues with Anime Revolution, our local con that popped up to replace the con before it, Anime Evolution, which fell apart for various reasons. Anime Revolution, that was a for-profit convention. There's some issues with the way that it's being run, and then there's there's been a lot of backlash from the people who were involved in other conventions that didn't work out in this environment too. So there's a very hostile environment going on here. What's great is that, as the one good thing about the con, like definitively great, is that they're able to get the big downtown Vancouver Convention Center every year, and that's really what you're paying for with that con, and that's the big upside to it.
Seems a critical piece, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just like, I don't know where else you could even try to run a con in this area, even if you go far out into the suburbs somewhere. And that's why it's so great that Anime North has been able to just keep chugging along the way it has. And I hope it can continue to be sustainable. So going back to just sort of how you grew into fandom online. So I know you were involved with multiple. Now was it like Usenet groups or different types of chat groups, or what did the Sailor Moon could you paint a picture of what the Sailor Moon general kind of chat fandom looked like online at that time? I know there was a lot going on with that.
Yeah, I mean, this was back in the day of news groups and everything, alt.fan.sailormoon kind of thing. So I kind of perused those. It was more the local boards, though, of the Freenet in Ottawa that, had basically local people. And those were the ones I perused more, which was like, ncf.fan.sailormoon, or I forget what they were called now, but you basically logged into their system.
Yeah, and were there other local groups in other areas, do you know, or was everyone pretty isolated in those?
I would imagine, there were, but I was never, I never went out and did tons of that.
I would imagine
just, I didn't want to overwhelm myself, I guess. I don't know. No, and then there were the role play groups as well, which was separate from that. You'd have to sort of, click into those through MUDs or Moos or whatever. And I found out about those through the news groups.
And, you did a lot of stuff involving role play, from what I understand, as well.
Yeah, there was the Sailor Moon role play, because there was the Basuju Senshi Sailor Mux. Mux was what? Mud user oriented? No, I forget. Anyway.
Yeah, I can't remember what that abbreviation stood for, but.
Yeah, I can't either. Oh well. But, where you take on the persona online, and of course, with one for Sailor Moon, you'd have someone role-playing the different Senshi and the different minor characters, and then you'd have new characters. We had a Tuxedo Mirage and all of this sort of thing. When I first joined, I joined to role-play Urawa, who was the Greg character.
Right.
So that went on for a little while, but I never ended up hooking up with the Sailor Mercury character of that time, because she was taking an interest in Sailor Jupiter. So Urawa basically became a private eye, he was helping a private eye. When we sort of shifted to season 2, he became a private eye. And then there were some other splinter ones as well, taking place in the Silver Millennium, as well as taking place back in the Moon Kingdom. And I don't know, long story short, I ended up taking over for the Mercury character back in the Sailor Moon Kingdom. And so I ended up shifting and actually playing Sailor Mercury herself online. And I had a couple other characters, incidental ones too. And then I went away from it for a while, and I came back later, and there was already another Mercury there. So I ended up actually applying for Sailor Jupiter. Funny enough, I got the part, and I kind of ended up flirting again with Sailor Mercury. So there's this weird snake eating its own tail thing of, when I started, I was, the Greg character, but Mercury was interested in Jupiter. And then I ended up as Jupiter interested in Mercury, and it was very weird, but kind of surreal and amusing in my mind.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Online roleplay is something I never got into. Things like the Mux roleplay, I think, by the time I was online in like the early 2000s, I think that was like, it was just like the tail end of that kind of stuff was like, what was the time frame of all this with the roleplay? That was strictly late 90s, or did it go on for a few years after that as well?
It was even, I even started in the mid 90s actually, because I didn't actually start through Sailor Moon. I started with just sort of a group, the equivalent to Discord back then. I don't know exactly what it was running on, but we used to role play in the Traveler domain or whatever. That was back in the mid 90s. And then there was the Sailor Moon thing, and that was late 90s. But that lasted right through for a while. Let me just quickly check an old file here.
Yeah.
On my computer. I have a file from...
You have a lot of this archive still.
I used to archive some of my better roleplay sessions. You just save the file and then put it in. And I have one here from 2009, and that was when I was Jupiter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this went this actually did go well into the 2000s. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it was not as big of a thing. Like back in the day in like 2000, we had like drinking games for the thing. Hey, drink whenever so-and-so walks into the scene. Drink whenever so-and-so complains about something, whatever. And then I sort of walked away from it myself, but I came back and it was still going. And that was, 2009, so.
Yeah. Most of this was like, before people generally used the World Wide Web or web browsers to access, or was this accessed through web browsers a lot of the time?
No, not through browsers.
Yeah.
It was, you'd sort of have your script, and then I used to sort of backdoor my way in through, I forget exactly. There was a bunch of menus, and then I had to pick one, and then, you'd type Telnet.
And, I know going back to the segment, they emphasize that things like, one thing that they put a lot of emphasis on was how things like the Ottawa-based Sailor Moon fan club was supposedly local, but rarely met in person. Did you find that was the actual experience for a lot of these things, or?
Again, it's hard to give, black and white answers for that because, at the anime showings, you'd usually meet up with a bunch of them. Would it be everybody, like all the representatives? No, you'd never really have a meeting of, all the representatives. It occasionally happened. Someone would throw a party and, we'd all kind of get together. But everyone was kind of rare. But I mean, they had these showings, at least monthly, if not more frequently, and you'd see people there. So,
you know what? I think that challenges the way it was presented in that, in that segment a bit. But of course, we have to remember that segment, I think, I guess it was actually, I think that segment aired the same year as the first Anime North as well.
Yes, it would have, actually. 97. It was filmed in 96.
It filmed in 96.
Yeah.
It was a few months before.
Yeah, I remember it being filmed in 96, but it didn't air till 97.
Yeah. And so, I know your fandom activities have declined a bit over the years, but there was a lot of overlap when you were getting into teaching, as I think you touched on earlier as well.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, did you find it something that you had to you just lost interest in, or had to move on from, or has your teaching career ever overlapped with your fandom activities in notable ways, or have you kept it pretty separate?
I mean, the thing with having a career, and in particular with it being teaching where you're grading papers all night, you don't have a lot of time to sort of, scour the web and mammoth, sessions and things. But, I mean, I never, hid that I was interested in anime. And when the anime club of the school needed a new teacher advisor because the teacher was changing schools or whatever, they approached me. So I've actually been the teacher advisor of the anime club there for over 10 years now.
And it's still running now?
It's still running.
I
a
know
lot,
high school anime clubs can be very ephemeral, but yeah.
Oh yeah, but
I would imagine you got some good support going on there.
it's kind of amazing because even last year, a lot of the seniors, or so I guess 2 years ago, a lot of the seniors graduated, but a bunch of the grade 9s were like, no, we want to keep this thing going. Mostly what they do now is sort of just watch one episode of an anime every Friday at lunch. It used to be a bit more, look into some of the cultural stuff, possibly share manga, but it's still going in the form it is. So there's that. The other overlap was, through the characters I draw for my math lessons.
I was going to ask if the students in in your club have seen the segment where you were interviewed on Undercurrents, or if that's, I imagine over 10 years it would have been a known thing with at least some people on there.
No, I do not believe they know about it.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's not the sort of thing I will necessarily bring up in conversation. Usually they bring up the time that I was in a music video for one of the alumni of the school, because that was also before I appeared.
What kind of music video was this?
It was Alex Lacasse, who's an alumni of our school, filmed the video for Like This, Like That, and I'm a teacher in one of the segments, in the background. And so a lot of the students are like, oh wow, look, there's Mr. Taylor before the beard. And, I don't sort of say, hey, do you want to see 10 years before that? Cause, I don't know how well that might or might not go over.
And is this out there? Can I find this on YouTube?
Sure. Yeah. Alex Lacasse, he did a few music videos, I think. And,
could you send me the link?
Sure. I will do that after.
Great. Thanks a lot. And sorry, you said something about creating characters for your math lessons?
Yes. Well, and a lot of my anime, awareness these days either comes through the anime club or through my attendance at Anime North. And there was an Anime North I went to where I saw Hitalia, which was personifications of all of these countries and learning history and geography. And I'm like, hey, what if we personified math functions to learn more about math? Because I'm a math teacher. And so I've drawn characters for most of the functions, and I tangentially use some of them in my lessons. I had an entire serial that ran for 200 episodes. I had a web comic that came a couple years after that when I tried to reinvent it. I keep trying to get people interested in this, but I'm not very good at publicity. But that's why my handle is MathTans.
Ah, right, yeah. And
if you were ever wondering about that.
Is this online to view anywhere right now?
Oh yes.
I
it's still
you have your sort of web port, your sort of personal website that you still maintain. I think it's been a little over a year since you've last updated it.
Quote unquote maintain. I go back to it every couple years just to see what's there. But no, I actually maintain a couple of blogs. One is from my fiction, which usually relates to time travel, and one is the personified math, MathTans, and I even threw it onto Tapastic, now Tapas. It's out there as a webcomic, and even the old serial is still online. But there was just never too much interested in it. I was never sure who to market it to.
Yeah.
Other teachers were just like, okay, you kind of do your thing. I mean, a couple of them were like, oh, that's neat, but how can I use this in a lesson? I'm like, well, I don't know.
So you're never really able to utilize it for teaching?
No, like the characters I use, because the hairstyles are the graphs. So that was the main thrust. But a lot of the plot and things, going to Fractal City or having, other, personifications, meet. Usually Versign was the evil, quote unquote evil character, because she wanted to bring back all the old trig. We don't use Versign anymore. A lot of that stuff, just no one was really enthused about it. And so I, again, gravitated more to some of my other fiction writing.
I find it interesting the way your creative and fandom impulse has evolved over the years, and well, I mean, obviously it has intersected with your career because of the way that whole project has been related. I'm just trying to think. I wonder how this either whether this enforces or challenges the idea of fandom as a sort of data collection that was presented in that segment. I don't think I can think of a conclusion to that right off the bat, but it's something to chew on for sure. I think I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, back then the internet was smaller, so, you know, there wasn't sort of do a web search and here's 2,000, you know, results. You actually sort of had to look for this stuff. And so when you found it was sort of like, haha, here we are. Whereas now, you know, you get all sort of misinformation and other stuff out there too. And so it's a different, you know, garden to be, you know, walking through. A lot more weeds and things, I guess.
Yeah, to say the least. And you had to be, you know, careful, even if you're going to like a wiki or something, like who's curating this information? Where is it actually sourced from? If there's a source beside it, like what actually happens when you click on that source link? Is it actually going to verify what has been stated? You never really know.
Has this been updated? Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting times for sure. So I was going to try to dig up some Sailor Mercury trivia and see how well your status of Sailor Mercury, your status as Sailor Mercury's ultimate fan is held up, but I didn't really want to bother with that. But
no, that's fair.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been dethroned at this point?
Oh, I would think so. I've watched Crystal, but not, as in depth as before, and that's the funny thing about the Sailor Moon in particular, right? Like it's perpetuated, it's come back and it's still out there, and keeping up with it would, just be too much for, me. I'm now in my 40s, right? So I have other priorities. So by all means, someone else can take the crown and do what they like with it. But, yeah. I'm more into Science Gate now.
Yeah, and Nanoha, I think, was one that you really like as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and one of the things I like about Nanoha is, like, while it keeps coming out, it's sort of evolved. Like, they started with her young, and then they came out with other series of her older, and then they sort of go back and they fill in the gaps. I mean, they've, reinvented the first season as a movie and everything, but I don't know, it's sort of got that Doctor Who vibe to me of, let's just keep whatever's already there and just sort of add more cool stuff to it rather than sort of go back to the beginning and restart everything.
Did you go see the movie a couple years ago?
When it was in theaters, yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, the second one has not come out in theaters. That is one thing I'm trying to keep an eye out for. But,
did it come out in theaters in Japan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was 1 year, and then the following year was the follow-up, which, tied everything up, and they only came the first one in Canada and the US. I'm like, but they had cool trading cards.
I'm kind of shocked that they even released that first one. It was,
with trading cards, nonetheless. I know, I was a little surprised too.
I mean, it's been a golden time for, that was a golden time for theatrical releases in Canada. You could argue it still is in the US, not so much right now. There's a lot of stuff we're not getting, but that's a topic for another episode. All right, Greg, was there anything else you wanted to bring up before we wrap up today?
Oh, I don't think so at this point. I think we've pretty much covered all of the cute, cool stuff,
okay.
out of my anime past.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I know you have like we've discussed, you have a few things online. Where can people find you online and what you do and what you've done?
Mathtans, basically. That's MATHTANS. Comes from the old days of OS TANs, like way back in the early 2000s when they used to personify operating systems. And so, yeah, I'm Mathtans on Twitter. I forget the trail on Instagram. I hardly use it. Mathtans.ca is where the little webcomic is that I used to run. Facebook, I'm Mathstans, so with an S, like the British, because someone got to Mathtans first. I don't know what they're using it for, but mostly, yeah, I'm Mathtans. Trying to brand it.
Okay.
And trying for, years.
And you're on Twitter at Mathtans, and
yep.
And where can people find your website too? The old one, the old school one, it's,
I was CZ159 on the National Capital Freenet, so I guess it would be like web.ncf.ca/CZ159, something like that.
Yeah, okay. You know what? I'll include a link to it.
I haven't
I'll include a
maintained
link
that
to it.
site as much.
Yeah, I'll include
Sure.
a link to it.
Link
on
to
the,
it.
on the notes.
Why not?
Yeah. All right,
Sounds
well,
good. Thanks.
Greg, it was fantastic having you on. This is a lovely. It was a lovely conversation. I'm glad you could take the time.
Thank you. This has been cool. I'm glad that you asked me.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for coming on. Hey everyone, so in my interview with Greg, I touched a little bit on Anime Revolution 2019 here in Vancouver, which was a couple of weeks ago at the time of this recording. As you may know, there's been a lot of controversy with this con due to the reports of their questionable handling of both a serial harasser and convicted sex offender that was recently reported on Anime News Network. Now, since I usually give at least a brief review of this convention, I thought I should talk a little more about it, but I thought it would be a little more appropriate to do that in a separate segment rather than doing that during my interview with Greg. So, Anime Revolution is a con that many people in the Vancouver area have been divided on for many years. They are a for-profit convention, and they are also beginning to expand their operations. They ran International Fan Fest in Toronto, and I understand they are also planning an event in Osaka at some point in Japan. When Anime Revolution, or Ani-Revo, as they call themselves, started, they started up in the flames of Anime Evolution, which had perished a couple of years prior for various reasons. Make your own assessment as to the decision of calling their convention something very similar to Anime Evolution. I know there are a lot of takes on that, but in any case, in their early years, Anime Revolution showed a lot of open hostility towards other local events, and that has built up a lot of resentment towards them in certain circles. Now, Ani-Revo has moved past that tactic, I would say, but that resentment that built up doesn't go away easily. Frankly, it is quite justified, and that is some of what is fueling the current controversy. I have a lot of problems with this con myself, but I try to give them a fair shake, because they do a good job of things like bringing in and maintaining relations with Japanese guests, like this year they did with Amiko Shimizu, Nobuyuki Hiyama, and Yanagi Nagi, among a few others. And they have managed to secure the Vancouver Convention Center, which is frankly an amazing venue for an anime con, even though they don't use nearly enough of it, which is understandable because it's incredibly expensive. My experience as a panelist at Anime Revolution has been very good, at least for the last 3 to 4 years. Before that, not so much. And on that note, I did do 3 panels this year as well. The Bionics 15th Anniversary Special, Anime Grindhouse, and Retro Shoujo Melodrama. They all went very well. I'm especially looking forward to doing Retro Shoujo Melodrama at some other conventions. I think people are really going to like that one. I'm hoping to work on it a little more. But anyway, those are the general strengths of Anime Revolution. So just to give a quick review as a con-goer for this year, I had a lot of fun. And that was the case for most of the people I know who attended the convention as well. As usual, the programming overall was pretty mediocre and a little too spread out, but we were generally able to find something to do for most of the weekend. The exhibitors hall was a big disappointment. It was smaller than usual, it was filled with bootlegs, and there was actually not a single vendor there selling new DVDs or manga, and even the vendors selling figurines were extremely limited and really scattershot. A big part of this is because Animethon in Edmonton was the same weekend, and simply put, Animethon has much better vendor relations than Anime Revolution does. And that isn't just because they are the oldest anime convention in Canada. There are some problems there with Anime Revolution. To the point where even local companies like CNL, who specialize in DVD and manga and other things, opted for Animethon over Anime Revolution, and I think that's not a very good sign for the state of vendor relations at this con. From the perspective of a con-goer, Anime Revolution does continue to improve in incremental ways each year, but unfortunately this year proved in a big way that this con is riddled with internal problems that negatively impact potentially the safety of their attendees and do raise serious questions about the event's optics and priorities. Primarily it was in their handling of the 2 individuals who have been getting a lot of specific attention here. Now there have been a lot of rumors and unverified facts floating around social media, both about this and about other things related to the convention. My recommendation is to focus less on the things that have been spreading on social media and more on what has been posted by reputable sources like Anime News Network. Lindsay Loveridge's report about Anime Revolution and those individuals is fantastic, and it does a great job of just cutting straight to the most important and verifiable details. This report also includes statements from Anime Revolution CEO Can No. There have been some disputes about the accuracy of what he says in these statements, which were apparently provided to Anime News Network the day after the event. Regardless, I personally feel that the statements Can provided, as well as the official comments posted on Anime Revolution's Facebook page, are more than enough for people to make an assessment of the con's handling of this situation. My assessment was that this was handled very badly. I can say that one of the individuals mentioned in this article is very well known locally, and nearly every local fandom event and organization has firmly banned him, despite the fact that there are often potential legal consequences in trying to do so. There is absolutely no way that Anime Revolution could have been unprepared for the challenges that would come with enforcing a ban. Honestly, there's no excuse for them to have wavered on a ban or to have flown by the seat of their pants on how they dealt with the issue, and yet they did. This is a serious mistake that can be traced right to many core problems that exist within Anime Revo's central operations. Unless some kind of dramatic, demonstrable change is made to the con's operations, and frankly, I don't even know what that would look like, I will not be attending Anime Revolution in 2020. Beyond that, well, we'll see what the future holds. I can't say for sure. But something definitely has to change here. That said, I'd also like to point out that Anime Revolution is severely lacking in LGBTQ+ and feminism panels as those topics relate to anime and manga. Obviously, I'm going to leave a gap behind by not doing any panels next year. That's what I feel they should fill it with. So, beyond that, I'll leave it to you to make your own assessment on the whole situation with Anime Revolution. Thank you for listening to Zon in Canada. I'd like to again thank Gregory Taylor for joining me on this episode. You can find me on Twitter @jbetteridge or email zonincanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultraclystron, and you can find it on his album Packet Flood at ultraclystron.com. If you know anyone who might be interested in this podcast, please recommend it to them. See you again.